The 80s and early 90s were a wild time, and the media from that era reflects this. If you just take a look at some of the anime and manga that was coming out during that era, you'll realize exactly what we're talking about. It was a time of freedom where creators were constantly experimenting as new tropes were being created that would define the industry for a long time into the future. One of the things that became extremely popular was the use of body horror and violence, with many of the greatest works in that genre coming out during that era. Some of the anime and manga in question are so violent that there's no way on earth that they would be released considering today's sensibilities, and even if they were, large parts of it would be heavily censored. You probably realize at this point that for some of these works, the violence and the gore were the point. While they weren't always bereft of a deep and engaging plot, it certainly wasn't always the forte of every single one of these animes. In today's marvelous anime video, we're going to be exploring the complete lore of a divisive anime called Genocyber. While there are many who deride the show, calling it an orgy of violence for violence's sake with nothing else going on for it, there are others who call it a forgotten gem of early 90s sci-fi. We hope that by the end of this video, you'll be able to make your own decision regarding this controversial anime. Genocyber was a 1992 manga series written by Japanese mangaka Tony Takazaki. Set in a futuristic, dystopian cyberpunk universe, the series follows the story of a young mute girl named Elaine and her crippled sister Diana, who have both been subjected to horrible experiments by a man who claims to be their father, in order to turn them into the greatest biological humanoid weapon known to man, called Genocyber. The story was never completed by the mangaka, and in 1994, an OVA series based on the only published volume manga of Genocyber was released under Koichi Ohara. However, there is a significant difference in how the plot unfolds in the manga and its anime adaptation. Despite the limited amount of material there is to work with, Ohara created a masterpiece within a well-crafted universe, so strap in as we enter this gruesome and bloody world of Genocyber and explore its lore, where violence is merely a means to an end. The inception of the Vajranoids. Just as the world had started recovering from the endless violence that plagued it and a new world order had begun to descend upon it, a new threat had begun to loom unknown to most of humanity. A scientist by the name of Dr. Morgan Nguyen had come up with a revolutionary idea to harness the energy of what he called the Vajra, an energy that exists between the mind shadows created by the human body. If humans could properly harness this new form of energy, it would completely revolutionize not just the energy sector, but also warfare as we know it. In order to harness this power, he creates a powerful machine called the Mandala, which he will use to harness this energy. Despite being a father to two twin daughters, Elaine and Diana, he doesn't hesitate to experiment on his wife, Tanya, to test his theory. Morgan is aided by his assistant, Kenneth Reed, who covets his work and conspires with the clandestine corporate entity called the Kuryu Group for additional funding and to take all the credit. With the Kuryu Group's help, he plots the assassination of Morgan, who's killed in a lab explosion. 5 years after the explosion, Reed rises to the position of the head of the scientific research team at Kuryu, backed by the chairman, Genichiro Kuryu himself. Reed had taken Morgan's daughters and raised them as his own. However, he continues to experiment with them in order to realize his dream of creating a perfect Vajranoid. The two daughters of Morgan, Elaine and Diana, are shown to be powerful espers possessing incredible psychic powers. Despite calling them his daughters, Morgan puts them through inhumane and harrowing experiments to the point that Diana's body is completely made up of cybernetic augmentations other than her head. The birth of Genocyber. Fast forward 14 years after the incident in which Morgan lost his life, we find out that the world is moving towards a unilateral disarmament and the establishment of a unified world governing body. This, however, doesn't sit well with a number of private firms that make their profit out of war and conflict. The Kuryu Group is one such entity, and they have been experimenting with espers to create human weapons. The experiments lack any ethics, and these superpowered individuals are treated as mere guinea pigs. One day, their most prized possession, a young mute girl named Elaine who behaves like an animal, goes missing from their research facility. Without her, the research on Genocyber comes to a grinding halt, and the company decides to send their hired goons in order to recover her. In the meantime, Elaine has begun living with a street urchin named Rat, and she quickly develops a bond with him. According to Diana, she felt that Elaine was the most content she had ever known her to be during her escapade. Reed uses Diana to track down Elaine and control her Vajra in order to use her relaxed state to their advantage. We find out that Diana resents Elaine as she views herself as a mere tool to rein in Elaine whenever she gets out of control. She's jealous of the favor that her adoptive father shows to her sister. Morgan forces Diana to wear a specialized battle suit to retrieve her sister, and after locating Elaine and killing the leader of a gang of street thugs, Diana tries to convince Elaine to return home with her. However, Elaine breaks through into another dimension and manages to escape from Diana. She reappears in a subway station along with Rats, with Elaine in a severely weakened state. As Rat guards her while she rests, the train that they're on is attacked by 3 cyborgs who kill everyone on the train except Rat and capture Elaine. However, Elaine manages to warp the mind of one of her captors into believing that there are bugs gnawing at his brain, making him claw his own head open, which kills him instantly. Weakened after having defended herself, Elaine is taken to a hospital to recover, while their father convinces Diana to hunt Elaine, promising her that if his experiments were to be successful, they would both become regular humans. Not long after, the hospital is attacked by Kenneth Reed's cronies, who lay waste to the medical facility in a horrifying display of gore. As Elaine is confronted by her sister, the 2 siblings battle against each other. Diana is badly wounded in the process, but is spared after pleading for her life. At that moment, 2 of the cyborgs that had attacked the train appeared holding Rat hostage. They ask Elaine to come quietly with them or risk losing her only friend's life. Sadly, as Elaine is distracted by the new arrivals, her sister uses her final strength to impale Elaine from behind. As the 2 sisters seemingly perish at each other's hands, Elaine's corporeal body dissipates, and her psyche seems to enter the body of Diana. The doctor is confronted by the cyborgs regarding information about the sisters. It's then revealed that Elaine and Diana had been born amidst a storm of Vajra energy, as their mother had been alive just long enough to give birth to them. Due to the intense energy, it had affected the infants such that Elaine had been born with the nervous system of an animal, while Diana had lost the ability to use her muscles. Diana had been conditioned to keep Elaine in check, as the latter had displayed much more potential. The cyborgs are revealed to have been working with his employers, and the reason they're here right now is to clean up the mess that Reed has created since he'd been working outside of company directives. As Diana's broken body is being transported across Hong Kong by the Koryu henchmen, along with Reed, who is now imprisoned, an explosion occurs with Genocyber finally being born in all of its destructive glory. As the 2 sisters' psychic energy fuses, a being far superior to anything that has ever existed is birthed. With his final dying breath as the explosion sweeps through him, Kenneth Reed watches his experiments bear fruit with a twisted smile. Destruction of Hong Kong! Immediately after its birth, Genocyber rushes through Hong Kong, engulfing several city blocks in a conflagration. As buildings crumble and fires break out everywhere, several lives are lost. The 2 cyborgs attack Genocyber but are easily dealt with and killed. As a new day dawns over Hong Kong after a night filled with carnage, Elaine, aka Genocyber, has halted its rampage and is seen sitting down in an unfinished building. She's visited by the spirit of her friend Rat, and the 2 reminisce about their short time together before he bids farewell and disappears forever, leaving Elaine in despair. Just as the boy's spirit disappears, we find out that Genocyber has been sitting in front of his dead body. From the looks of it, he had been dropped from the sky onto an unfinished building. Filled with rage and despair over losing the only person she ever truly cared about, Elaine lashes out, enraged, and wipes out Hong Kong from the face of the earth in a massive explosion. Caught in the crossfire! The next time we see Elaine, she's caught up in an assault by a squadron of attack helicopters that are shooting down unarmed civilians mercilessly. Triggered by this, she transforms into Genocyber and begins destroying the machines responsible in a typically brutal fashion. Not long after, we learn that the United States of America has just entered into a war with a nation called Korean, who had withdrawn from the United Nations, citing their discontent regarding the US's new experimental troops. However, since Korean was a country that was mostly composed of desert landscapes, the magnetic field of sand rendered most modern weaponry and radar systems useless. The only way for the United States to attack them was through the Gulf on the eastern side of Korean. This was the reason that those attack helicopters had invaded from that area. The top brass of the US called an emergency meeting with the Koryu group, enlisting them to help the army deal with this crisis after they gained footage regarding a new unknown weapon that had taken out their helicopters effortlessly. We learned that a new type of Vajra weaponry, one which was bereft of human limitation, was created by a scientist named Sakamizu. This Vajranoid, as he called it, had the capability to fully integrate itself with any machine, increasing its effectiveness by over 100%. The US government thus deploys it in the hopes of it being able to counter what they perceive to be Karain's secret weapon. The Vajranoid, however, goes rogue and attacks a UN plane carrying Elaine, who for some reason have been rescued by it after having passed out. Sakamizu is left disgraced after the military feels that the Vajranoid attacked a plane carrying a civilian. They didn't know that the Vajranoid had only done so after sensing Genocyber on that plane. Sakamizu gains a sliver of truth regarding the matter later on when his Vajranoid informs him that if he had not attacked the plane, it would have risked getting destroyed. However, no one knows that Elaine is actually Genocyber, and she's taken in by a female doctor called Myra. She seems to genuinely care for Elaine's well-being and protects her from being bullied for her appearance and mannerisms. Myra begins calling Elaine Laura and treats her like her own child due to the girl reminding the doctor of her own daughter, who she had lost in a plane crash. Elaine seems to have settled into life on the aircraft carrier, as most people are sympathetic to her situation. However, things wouldn't stay peaceful for much longer, as Elaine is led through the ship by the apparitions of the dead Karain children. They lead her directly to where the Vajranoid is located. As the two beings come into contact, they react to each other's presence and begin to awaken. Elaine transforms into Genocyber as the Sakamizu's Vajranoid breaks free from its tethers, and the two begin to clash. As the two begin to fight, the Vajranoid manages to damage one of the Genocyber's arms enough that the entity is forced to amputate. Despite being at a seeming disadvantage, Genocyber manages to overload the Vajranoid's systems with psychic energy, causing it to explode and destroy itself. Just as this happens, the door to the chamber where they were fighting finally opens, and the crew and Myra discover an unconscious Elaine and a destroyed Vajranoid, with no suspicion that Elaine has had anything to do with it. The only person who believes that Elaine had anything to do with the incident seems to be Sakamizu, but no one takes him seriously because he's beginning his descent into madness. Vajranoid versus Genocyber. Final showdown. After being corrupted by the severed arm of Genocyber, Sakamizu begins creating a new Vajranoid in secret. Once complete, this new Vajranoid immediately begins to fuse with the ship and its crew in a horrifying manner. As if they had been sacrificed to an eldritch deity, the vessel and its crew become one with this Vajranoid. Only Myra and Elaine remain untouched thanks to Genocyber's powers. The two make it to the deck of the ship, fighting off attacks from the ship, which is now completely mutated. There, they meet Sakamizu, who has completely gone insane, and listen to his exposition about how the aircraft carrier Alexandria and its crew were being reformed into a newer and higher state of being. He mentions that the crew, despite being absorbed by the ship, retained their personality and therefore were alive and retained their consciousness. Fueled by their desire to destroy their enemy, this new and evolved Vajranoid would strike at the Karain coastline and destroy everything, fulfilling its mission. Sakamizu then transforms into a monster and attacks the two women, only to be destroyed by Elaine. In the meantime, Myra, having witnessed so many of these horrifying events in a single day, begins to lose her mind as well. The final battle ensues as Elaine transforms into Genocyber and dives into the heart of the ship, destroying it in a massive explosion. We're then shown a scene where Myra is rescued from the ship's debris by a Karain helicopter, which is on its way back to the mainland to treat her injuries. As they approach land, their hails for entry go unanswered, only for them to discover moments later that their entire country has been destroyed by Genocyber. Myra, who sees Genocyber floating above the burning landmass, declares that her daughter has returned as an angel. Having gone completely insane, she begins crying out at Genocyber to take her away from this hell with her. However, her cries are left unanswered. In the end, Karain met the same fate as Hong Kong and was wiped off the face of the earth. Exploring the end times. Fast forward 100 years into the future, the world as we know it just doesn't exist anymore. One by one, all the major nations and cities have fallen to the might of Genocyber. Earth is a desolate wasteland with pockets of human resistance fighting a desperate and losing battle against Genocyber. One of the final bastions of humanity is called the Arc de Grande City. Despite seeming like a beacon of light in a desolate world, the city is anything but a safe haven. Ruled by a power-hungry and cunning mayor who punishes dissent ruthlessly, it's a city on edge filled with refugees ruled by an iron fist. Composed of mostly the disenfranchised people of the city, there is a secret sect that seeks to topple the mayor. These rebels are brutally persecuted by the authorities and are subject to execution via firing squad. The sect believes that the old humanity incurred God's wrath, due to which civilization was destroyed, resulting in the current state of existence. Hidden behind a religious guise is a clear effort to rouse the rabble against their overlords, as the series highlights the class differences in society. We're introduced to two new characters, Ryu and Mel, who have traveled to Arc de Grande City in order to search for a cure for the latter's blindness. The two are seen making their living as street performers, with the girl showing some propensity for psychic abilities, as she is able to guess certain things despite being blind. The sect that we spoke about earlier comes to the mayor's notice, who, fearing their increasing influence, orders their destruction. At the same time, we find out that the Genocyber lies dormant deep underground within the sect's base and is treated as a god. Ryu, in the meantime, is tricked into murdering a man for the entertainment of the elite. Beset by guards on his heels, he runs to gather Mel in order to flee from the city. As the two flee into the sewers, Mel is guided by the disembodied voice of Diana when the floor collapses from underneath and they find themselves in the chamber housing the dormant Genocyber. It is revealed that towards the end of the Genocyber's rampage, Diana had managed to convince Elaine that the power had no place in this world, resulting in them becoming inert. Mel is heralded as the god's prophet by the underground church. She is, however, separated from Ryu. Not long after, Ryu is captured by the city's police and the underground church is raided, and the people there are slaughtered like animals. We find out that Mel was pregnant with Ryu's child all along. As everything around Mel collapses, she reaches Elaine from within her subconscious and merges with Genocyber, awakening it in a new and larger form. It begins by killing the mayor and then proceeds to burn the city down brick by brick. A new beginning. The rebirth. Just before Genocyber flies into space to destroy the orbiting space station, it separates Mel from itself and floats both her and Ryu down into the city. Once in the space station, she discovers a video of Genichiro Kuryu asking someone to destroy the target repeatedly. Genocyber then begins freezing the space station as it plummets towards the Earth. In the final scene, we see that the fires in the city have died out and Mel awakens next to Ryu. Her eyes seem to have healed as she gazes upon debris that looks like Genocyber, even as a baby's voice rings in the air. We're not told anything about the fate of Elaine and Diana or Mel and Ryu thereafter. Fans speculate that the child is supposed to herald a new beginning for mankind after the destruction and complete annihilation of humanity by Genocyber. It's believed by some that this child is the same child that Mel was pregnant with and now contains the souls of both Elaine and Diana. Thus, the saga of Genocyber comes to an end. Marvelous verdict! Despite some key changes in the plot, for example, in the manga, Elaine is a friendly and free-spirited young girl, while in the anime she's mute and childlike with no social skills, the OVA retains much of what made the manga by Tony Takazaki iconic. Another example of this sort of change is Diana's character. In the manga, she's depicted as a sweet and fragile girl, whereas in the anime she's filled with murderous intent. The series doesn't shy away from graphic violence involving children, and maybe it's this that has put some viewers off. However, one must give credit where credit is due, as Genocyber's unabashed use of body horror is something of an art. It greatly enhances the visceral nature of the story and adds an unsettling sensation to its somewhat fragmented plot. The violence itself is a shock to the senses, even for viewers watching the series 3 decades after its inception. The series heavily plays into biblical tropes like Cain and Abel and Adam and Eve. Diana killing her sister in a fit of jealousy due to her father's favoritism towards her younger sibling perfectly matches this. In the end, after paradise is lost, Ryu and Mel, who are probably the only humans left alive, are thrust into the wilderness to repopulate the Earth once again in a way that feels very reminiscent of Adam and Eve. As you can see, unlike the naysayers, we believe that this series has a lot of depth to it. Not to mention, it covers profound human themes like existential crises, depression, love, and the fragility of human life. We hope that we've managed to pique your interest in this underrated anime, and for more content like this, be sure to check out the rest of our channel. You'll find videos covering all your favorite anime and characters there, so thanks for sticking with us right to the end of this one. We hope to see you soon in the next. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, stay safe and stay marvelous.